Hello everyone, this is Leo from the Monkeys Making Misplaced channel. Today I bring you the second installment of our Units to Buy In series. For this one we're going to talk about the Nation of Dragon Empire. What units might you be interested in buying for future decks, things like that. But first, let me go over the generic spiel. The first few slides will be similar in each video, but since I can't know which of the six nations you might pick to start, I will go over each of them in the respective video. There were certain restrictions I put in place with coming up with the list of units. For instance, I don't talk about orders, be they normal, blitz, or set. I only choose to talk about units themselves. I included units that certain archetypes might need, but avoided those that were maybe too bland. Something like plus 5k isn't that exciting unless there's something else attached to it. Well, we will be going in increasing grade starting from 0 to 3. I've grouped cards with similar effect and left those with more unique effects for the end of each grouping. So let's start with the grade zeros. Uh, Sorry. Not much to say here since it's very self-explanatory that you should pick up a set of effect triggers for your nation. Although they can sometimes be expensive, they're a worthwhile investment. They can go in every deck. Over triggers, the same thing. If you want to pick up an over trigger, you're going to want to pick up your nation ones. And then you have your generic ones in the blue Cray Elemental and the red Cray Elemental. Then we have grade ones. We start with the perfect guards. Obviously, pick up perfect guards. They're great cards to pick up. Uh, Nothing really there, but now let's move on to some of the more unique grade one effects. And let's start with cards that benefit from being retired. Rearguard Retire is a common ability in Dragon Empire, starting with Shiga Manago, which is if an opponent's rearguard is retired during the main phase, you can retire her to look at the top card and either call it to rear, or if you choose not to, you can just put her in the bottom, or put that card into soul. She's from grade 1, it's only a couple cents, so nothing really lost if you pick up a set. Then we have Idurus, who, if an opponent's unit is retired during your turn, will allow you to counterblast one to choose one of two effects. The first is to give itself plus 10, and the second is to go in a soul and choose an opponent's grade 2 or greater rearguard and retire it. Keep in mind that you may use the plus 10k multiple times, but each time will cost a CB. He's from set 2 and is only like 10 cents, so again, not breaking the bank here. Then we're moving on to Draco Batical, who once per turn allows you to Soul Blast one when an opponent's rearguard is retired. To check top 5 for a grade 1 or less, call it to rear. Draco Batical is the Dragon Tree unit for Dragon Empire, so he was released in set 9 and is about $1 a copy, so he's still pretty cheap. I do believe these Dragon Tree units might be expensive as we go further along in that deck's lifespan. And then lastly here we have Bolt Shaker Dragon, who can Soul Blast 1 to gain plus 5k each time an opponent's rearguard is retired during your turn. Although he is a promo, he's very cheap, and if you're looking for more power in a deck that retires, that he could help. These are not the only in these groupings, so let's move on to the next grouping. Starting with Hanife, who is a 15k grade 1. They can stay on board if you have retired a unit the turn it is called. If you have plenty of main phase retire, then she is a huge boost, so they can just sit around and provide a incredible amount of power. She's also common for set 10, so she's only a cent. So you can probably find it in the bulk of your LGS, things like that. Next, let's discuss Bernaya, who will retire itself at the end of the battle boosted to draw you a card if any player's rearguard was retired this turn. That includes your units or your opponent's units. This is a great card to avoid things like lock, bind, retire as well, as it gets rid of itself, giving your opponent not giving your opponent the chance to get rid of your unit, as well as it giving you a card back. Even though he is a recent card and has just having been printed in set 10, he's still cheap for a double rare. You can get a set for about $2. And then after him, we have Silent Crow, who allows you to counterblast 1 to draw a card once per turn if an opponent's rearguard was retired in the same column as him. This is an incredible effect to have on a grade 1, as it can just sit in the back row and you're able to activate the effect whenever you need or want to. He is a triple rare from set 7, but he's only about 25 cents, so you can get playset for less than $2. He can also gain plus 5k placed by a card's ability, but that ability won't trigger very frequently. Not a lot of cards can really call him, but the decks that do will get an extra effect besides just being able to draw cards. Um, then we have Gaze Fort, yes, who can restand himself from the back row and gain plus 2k when an opponent's rearguard is retired. You can only do this once per turn. But if you have battle phase retired, then you can use him to gain a second boost, right? Let's say you have to attack a rear guard or something like that. That would trigger him. He's able to restand. He is a common from set 4, I believe. So again, will be sent online, or you could just dig through book, probably find him. And with that, we can end the this section of grade ones. Moving on to the boosting effects. First, we start off with Gojo, who can retire himself to countercharge 1 if the Vanguard's attack he boosted hits. Although it is a very restrictive effect and needing to specifically boost Vanguard, there isn't much in the way of countercharging Dragon Empire, so if you really need it, then Gojo is your guy. He is a common from set 2, so don't expect an outrageous price. I think cents probably. Following that, we have Orofas, who can gain some insane power. He can gain plus 5k for every other grade 1 or less rearguard you control whenever he attacks or boosts for a Soul Blast. The versatility of being both an incredible attacker and booster is incredible. Double incredible there, my bad. He is a double rare from set 5, and even though he is so versatile, he is less than 10 cents on most sites. And then following Urfast, we have Perceptera, who can Soul Blast 1 when he boosts to give the unit boosted an ability to retire a rearguard when he hits a Vanguard. This means that ability sticks on whatever unit he chooses to boost, so even if Perceptera isn't able to restand to boost that unit again, the unit he has given the ability to will just have it regardless. So if you have some unit that restand, then that ability will be a constant annoyance for your opponent, as they have to make sure that rearguard doesn't hit if they don't want to lose their own rearguards. Having been released in set 9 and being a rare makes him easy to find at stores, but online he is cheap. Next we have N10, who can Soul Blast 1 and retire himself to give another unit an extra 10k whenever the unit he boosts hits. He can remove himself while providing the on-hit pressure, so either your opponent says that they'll take the damage to avoid the extra power, or they gotta have to let your smaller attack hits so that they can try and guard the bigger attack that follows it. He's a common from set 2, which makes him so cheap, so again, you're not breaking the bank here. And then finally, we have Tenshestead, who I think is probably the best of these effects. He can get you a copy of your Vanguard when he finished boosting. The only thing is that he can do this by having an attack he boosted hit, then you have to counterblast 1 and retire himself. This effect guarantees you a Persona ride if you can get the attack to hit. He is a double rare from set 1 and is about 25 cents a copy, but with that we end the boosting section of the grade 1s. Let's move on to the right deck support. This section was a little hard to name, but I believe right deck support is what makes the most sense. First off, we have Kagari, who when discarded allows you to CB1 and give your Vanguard an extra 10k. This means you can pitch him to red up and give your Vanguard an extra 10k for the rest of the turn. This extra power can make your opponent's guarding more difficult. At grade 2, your opponent will have to use at least 25k shield to protect your Vanguard's attack. Then at grade 3, you can start at 23k, which with an AK booster comes up to 31. Now your opponent needs at least 20k shield to guarantee attack. This doesn't account for triggers or other sources of extra power. Being a double rare from the second festival collection, I believe, makes him a little harder to find locally, but online he's about 5 cents, so not really that expensive. Next we have Togachirashi, who lets you put him into soul when it's discarded from hand during your turn. He has a printing in set 2 and 9 is less than 25 cents, so about $1 for a set. He's a simple effect, but if you have something to pitch for the right deck while not just losing out on cards, then he is great. Then lastly in the section we have Shihab, who has 2 effects. The first is to gain plus 5k when placing the second ability is to change the requirement to write up from your right deck from discard a card to put this unit into soul. Being able to create soul and not be wasted by being called makes him a good choice for decks with a lot of combo pieces, as you don't want to have to discard cards, and being able to just say, oh well, just call this and then next turn I can just put him into soul makes him a pretty decent card in my opinion. His power buff, although small, makes your attack slightly more annoying. At grade 1, he makes your Vanguard swing for 21k, which means a trigger won't be enough to guard. At grade 2, it makes your Vanguard 23k, which again means your opponent must guard differently and waste more shield. A great card that is less than 25 cents from set 3, and you can go into any deck. Now let's move on to some of the more unique effects, starting with Fushimachi Madoka, who gains both power and shield value as the game goes on. If your opponent has 4 cards in drop, then he gains plus 2k power, plus 5k shield. Then once their opponent has 8 cards in drop, he gains another 5k shield. So that means he's a grade 1 with 15k shield. So that makes him on the level of a trigger. So now you have extra shield in your hand, making it easier for you to guard more attacks. He has 2 printings, one being in set 3 and the second in the festival collection for 2023. But he goes for less than $1 a copy, so you'll be fine in picking him up. Then we have Static Crack Dragon, who gives any unit placed in the same column as him an extra 5k until end of turn. And I know I said that 5k effects isn't something I would put, but as his effect triggers each time a unit is placed in front of him, he's able to provide more than 5k. He's very cheap. He's from set 8, so pick up a set, give it a try. Maybe you'll like the extra power that he provides, being able to just sit there. And then following that, we have Orlando, who could have been in the retired benefit grouping, but as the ability that gets more use is his ability to move into soul, I decided to place him here instead of in the retired group. He provides soul, power, and while being able to reuse if you can retire a rearguard during the main phase. He is only a rare from set 3, so don't expect any outrageous price here. And then lastly, we have Meat Hot, who can retire himself to draw a card when a unit restands by a card's ability. There are a lot of units that restand by card's ability in Dragon Empire. Obviously, there's certain decks that don't restand, but there are quite a few that do, either restanding a rearguard, restanding the Vanguard itself, things like that. So if you have multiple instances of this guy, you can draw multiple cards, right? He's a common from set 7, so again, very cheap. But now let's move on to the Grave 2s. The first section here is those that can produce soul. Starting with Gallon Flare Dragon, who can counterblast 1, put him to soul to give your Vanguard an ability. The ability allows you to draw a card and countercharge 1 whenever it hits a Vanguard. If your Vanguard restands, or if you simply want to put pressure on your opponent and guard your Vanguard attack, this guy's going to do it. He's a common from set 7, so he's cheap. Then we have Heat Stamping Dragon, who when your Vanguard attacks will go into soul if your opponent controls 2 or less rearguards. It will then give your Vanguard an extra 10k. Common from set 6 that has barely seen any play, but could be something your deck might want. Following that, we have Travis, who once per turn, if your opponent's rearguard is retired this turn, you can counterblast 1 to soul charge 1, retire another rearguard, and gain plus 10k power. This guy's from set 3 and is about $2 per copy, which is a little strange, but maybe there's some deck that really likes that effect. But I mean, he is a 20k unit that can retire and soul charge, so I can see why he would be so strong. But last in this section, we have Randor, who is a unit from the Eugene right lane, that when it attacks, if your opponent controls 2 or less rearguards, you can Soul Blast 1, or Counterblast 1, to Soul Charge 1, gain plus 5, right? And with that, let's move on to the card draw section. To start here, we have Fudo Maru, who on hit lets you discard a card or draw a card. This effect might seem weak, but as we have seen, there are cards in Dragon Empire that trigger from being discarded. If there is a card in the future that calls itself when discarded, then this unit would put pressure on your opponent to guard, as they don't want to be attacked multiple times. Being a rare from set 1 and pretty much bulk fodder, he is incredibly cheap. But now let's move on to Elba. It's a promo that hints at a Blaze Maiden archetype in the future. Hopefully, that's one of my wants would be a Blaze Maiden archetype itself. I know that there are Blaze Maidens plenty, but they're mostly used for the Overdress deck or for Vavsagra. I would like a pure Blaze Maiden deck. I think that would be incredible. She allows you to draw a card by counterblasting 1 and resting 3 Blaze Maidens with different names. And she also gives your Vanguard the ability that all of your front row units get plus 10k until end of turn. So essentially, she's a Persona ride. But the cost of that effect is really high at having to have 3 Blaze Maidens with different names. So that's the real downside there. She does have 3 printing, so if you just wanted to pick up a set for the Blaze Maiden Dream, then I would completely understand. She's very cheap. I do hope they receive a proper boss. Doesn't seem likely. We're already seeing cards in set 13, and we have no Blaze Maiden Vanguard in sight. But I'll keep the dream alive. Then we move on to Brachial Force. Sorry, I lost myself there a little bit. Who has a simple effect that when this attack hits, retire him, draw a card, then retire one of your opponent's rearguards. Even though he's a common, he is $1 per copy because I believe he's being played in a lot of Gandiva lists. So I understand why he is a little bit higher on the cost for what is a common essentially. Then we have a similar effect in Ethan, who can, when your Vanguard's attack hits, retire himself to draw a card and countercharge one. Right? I think he's about like 5 cents, so not really expensive. But I do believe that he could be very strong in the Rebellion deck that's coming out in set 11. But now let's move on to some retire units. Let's start with the Dragon Empire Cycler, Kolgaflan, who can, when discarded during the right phase, Soul Blast 1, put himself on the bottom to draw your card. That's a generic effect across all the Cyclers. But when he's placed on rearguard, if you Persona Road, you can Counterblast 1 to retire all of your opponent's rearguard in the same column as him. He's a versatile card that provokes both drawing and removal. Having been released in set 10, he sits at around $4, so he's not incredibly expensive for a Cycler. And then let's talk about Desolate Spark Dragon, who on attack, if you Persona Road, you can Soul Blast 1 to retire an opponent's rearguard, gain +5. Then your opponent chooses 3 units from drop and binds them. This can get annoying for certain strategies like Alchemagic, Ava. You can get rid of their obfuscate so they can't retrieve them. He's very cheap as he hasn't seen much play, but who knows if binding can help a strategy in the future, then this might be the perfect card for it. And then lastly here we have Meteor Thriller Dragon, who I think is a very, very strong card. He has, when placed on rear, until end of your opponent, until end of your turn, your opponent's rearguards lose all continuous abilities. Then you can counterblast 1 to retire an opponent's unit in the same column as this unit. It also gains 10k if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater and has no rearguards. But what you really want him for is his ability to remove all continuous abilities until end of turn. This gets around Ava's protection effects, things like that. He's a very, very strong card. However, he is about $22 currently on TCG Player, so he's not exactly the cheapest card. But if you have him, I would suggest holding them if you are playing them in your deck, or if you see yourself playing Dragon Empire. If you just have any lying around, I would suggest selling them. But if you're gonna buy them, I would really take time to consider that purchase because it's about $88 for 4 cards, and you could probably find a cheaper alternative, right? But if you know for sure your deck needs it, then nothing I can do to change your mind, right? But let's move on to some of the unique effects. Let's speed up here since we are going quite long at this point. Starting with Baxter, who has a protection effect and gives power to himself in Vanguard. He's from set 10. He's less than $1 per copy. Then we have Tanya, who can give you a grade 0 rearguard and also buff that grade 0 rearguard. This unit can be nice if you want to create a strong column, right? If you can call out a trigger and then give that trigger another 5, it'll be a 20k column with just her alone. It also makes it so that your triggers aren't just pitch fodder, right, or guarding, right? You can now reuse them as units. She's from set 2. She's sent, so if you believe in the Blaze Maiden Dream just like I do, right, you want to play her. Then following Tanya, we have Staddle, who prevents your rearguards from being hit if your Vanguard hasn't been attacked this turn. He has to be in the front row, but if they can't hit him first, then there's uh, no real concern, right? And it also lets you intercept, so that's why he's really strong. He essentially lets you keep your intercepts. He's from set 9. He's only a rare, so again, very cheap. Find them in the bulk or order. Last, we have the discard effect in Perforate Burner Dragon, who, when pitched during the battle phase, will go into Soul and give a unit plus 5k. He's only 25 cents, so not breaking the bank after you buy Meteor Flare Dragon. With that, let's go on to grade 3. we actually have two cards here that produce soul. The first is Burial Dignal, who will go into soul at the end of the battle. It attacked and give another rear guard plus 5k. Simple effect that produces soul, gives power, it has no real cost. This is a common from set 5, and it costs a couple cents, so again, no real worries after you've broken the bank buying the Meteor Flares. Then following that, we have Tribash, who has a strong effect in being able to give your Vanguard a crit if your opponent has 2 or less rear guards and you put him into soul. He's a rare from set 1 that you could play in something like Gandiva or Dragonic Overlord as a way to get extra crits. Then let's get on to some of the unique effects in grade 3, starting with Koki, who can counterblast 1 when placed to call a grade 0 from drop in the same column as him, and it gains boost. It's a strange effect, but it could be something an archetype might like if we get more grade 0s besides Trick Moon and Trickstar that aren't triggers. Again, he's very cheap. I know he is a double rare, or no, he's a common, but he's very cheap. And then we have Red Exert Dragon, who is the OT user for Dragon Empire. He gains power and shield when an opponent drive checks or damage checks a trigger. He'll gain 10k power or 10k shield. And then when you attack, you can counterblast 1 to retire a rear guard. And if you are unable to retire a rear guard, you can draw a card. Then you can remove the OT from drop to give him plus 15k for that battle. He's from the latest Festival collection. He's about $1 a copy. Not really great in my opinion, but you never know when these cards might see play in a specific strategy. You know, I mean, we've seen support happen for things like Musashi Armor and the Angler Fisher, so who knows if these cards might not receive more support down the line. And the last here is a tech choice that I could see being played in the future as a way to disrupt graveyard strategies, and that's Crimsago, who can Soul Blast 1 when he attacks to force your opponent to bind 3 cards from drop, and if they aren't able to, he gains power. Again, just like I mentioned with the other card that binds from drop, things like Ava, things like Zorga, you know, things that use that want to recover units from graveyard, things like that are going to be very annoyed if you keep removing their pieces. Then we have some honorable mentions, which I'm really going to use this section for combo units or cards that are niche but strong. And to start that off, we have Virina Esperita, who can restand for a Soul Blast when your Vanguard attacks. That is an incredible effect. The issue is that I don't think many decks can call it out outside of things like Dragon Tree, the Nirvana deck clearly, and I believe Eugene can do it if they can stack him on top of the deck. But again, he's a very strong unit. The ability to restand is great, right? And then we have the combo of Addison and Madison, who can provide you soul and power, but are really just here because I want to keep the Blaze Maiden dream true. But with that, we finished Dragon Empire. This video was quite long, but I feel like there may be some favoritism here from Bushy. That is because I also tried to sped through it. I wasn't able to talk as much because if not, this would have been like a 40-minute video. Thankfully, there's very few expensive cards here, although I think Meteor Flare Dragon was quite expensive and is a little bit too expensive for what he does, but I understand that certain decks really just want this. And I know he's played, I think, outside of Overdress, so that's understandable. But with that, I'll leave you guys for now. Thank you for watching. This has been Leo. Have a nice day.